The people who bother you most are not your problem. They are your own interior wearing someone else's face. Think about that for a moment before you dismiss it. Think about the specific face that came to mind just now. The person at work who speaks too loudly in meetings, the friend who always makes everything about themselves, the stranger online whose confidence irritates you before they've even finished their sentence. That face. That particular tightening in your chest. Hold it there for a second, because what I'm about to say is not going to be comfortable, and the discomfort is exactly the point. There is a version of you that already knows what this video is going to tell you. It has suspected it for a while. It noticed at some point that the same quality keeps appearing in different people. A different name, a different face, the same irritation. And instead of following that threat, you filed it away. You told yourself the world just happens to be full of people with this particular flaw, and you happen to be the one clear-eyed enough to notice it. That version of you is the one I'm talking to. Picture a dinner table. It doesn't matter whose. It could be the one from your childhood or last year's holiday gathering, or a Tuesday 3 months ago when someone said something that shouldn't have stayed with you but did. There's a person across from you and they're doing the thing. Maybe they're dominating the conversation. Maybe they're being careless with someone else's feelings. Maybe they're performing a confidence they haven't earned, or fishing for attention in a way they'd never admit to, or saying with total certainty something you know to be half true. And the feeling that rises in you is not just mild distaste. It is disproportionate. You've noticed this before, the gap between the offense and the reaction. Someone does something small and you feel it like a door closing in your chest. You tell yourself it's because you have standards, because you've been through things, because you see more clearly than most. All of that might even be partially true. But it doesn't explain the heat. The heat is the evidence. Not of their failing. Of something else. You excuse yourself from the table before dessert. In the car on the way home, you analyze what they did, carefully, methodically, the way you do when you want to feel righteous about being upset. You build the case. You stack the examples. You return to the same scene 2 or 3 times, refining your verdict each time, making sure it holds. And somewhere in the back of your mind, not quite making it to the front, is a very quiet question. Why does this bother me so much? You don't answer it. You turn up the radio. But the question doesn't go anywhere. It's still there the next morning when you wake up, smaller than yesterday but present, a low hum under the coffee in the commute. It follows you and you follow a policy of not following it. You've been doing this for years. You are very good at it. The question is waiting for you now. Your strongest judgments are not observations. They are confessions. This is not a metaphor. This is the mechanics of how the psyche works when it doesn't want to look at itself. And it has been happening, probably for years, in the judgments you make so quickly they feel like perception, in the people you decide you don't like within 30 seconds of meeting them, in the qualities you describe with a particular sharpness of contempt, as though the contempt itself were proof of your distance from that quality. You are not distant from it. The contempt is the proof of the proximity. There is a pattern in who irritates you. Not just that certain people irritate you, but that the same things irritate you. The arrogance, the neediness, the vanity, the carelessness, the self-promotion. Whatever it is in your case, it is consistent enough that the honest part of you has started to notice it. And the less honest part has been working very hard to explain it away as coincidence, or bad luck, or an accurate reading of a world that simply happens to be full of those exact flaws. But coincidence doesn't produce this much heat. Coincidence doesn't follow you from city to city, from job to job, from relationship to relationship, delivering the same face wearing a different name. It doesn't make your jaw tighten at the same moment in every interaction, doesn't send the same word to the front of your mind like a familiar verdict. There is something else to notice here, something you may have been too close to see, the precision of your contempt. You don't dislike this quality vaguely in the abstract. You dislike it in a specific, detailed, almost taxonomic way. You can identify it within seconds. You can describe its variants. You have a vocabulary for it that most people don't have, because most people haven't needed one. The reason you have that vocabulary is not that you are more perceptive. It is that some part of you has been cataloging this quality for a very long time, from the inside. What follows you is yours. Carl Jung was not primarily a theorist. He was a doctor sitting across from people who were sick in ways medicine hadn't named yet. The things they told him, the strange eruptions, the inexplicable hatreds, the loves that made no sense, the recurring dreams, kept pointing toward the same territory, the part of the self that the self refuses to see. He called it the shadow. And one of the mechanisms by which the shadow makes itself known, the clearest, most reliable, most socially invisible mechanism, was projection. Jung wrote in 2 essays on analytical psychology, projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face. Read that again slowly. Not a person, the world. The entire landscape of your social experience becomes a mirror for the face you have not yet had the courage to examine. Because you haven't examined it, you don't recognize it when it appears. You experience it as something out there, as a quality that belongs to them, as evidence of their problem rather than cartography of your own interior. What Jung was pointing to here was not an occasional mistake of perception, the kind of thing you correct once you have better information. It was a structural feature of the psyche. A defense so seamlessly executed that it never announces itself as a defense. You don't feel yourself projecting. You feel yourself accurately perceiving. The experience from the inside is indistinguishable from clear-eyed observation. That is precisely what makes it so effective, so durable, and so difficult to dismantle. Elsewhere in the same work, Jung noted, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Not might. Not sometimes. Can, if we are willing to follow the irritation backward rather than outward, to treat the reaction as a signal rather than a verdict. Taking this further than Jung explicitly stated, projection doesn't only protect the ego from what it fears in itself. It also performs an elaborate, unconscious devotion to the rejected quality. The person who cannot stand arrogance has usually suppressed a significant amount of their own hunger for recognition. The person who is infuriated by neediness has often built an entire identity around not needing anyone. The person who despises visible weakness has, somewhere inside them, a wound so old it had to be sealed off permanently. The contempt is not neutrality. It is vigilance. You are watching the border of yourself. There is a man, let's call him Daniel. He is 41 years old and works in an open-plan office where his colleague Lucas has become, over the course of about 2 years, one of the most irritating presences of his adult life. Lucas is loud in meetings. Lucas makes jokes that are slightly too familiar. Lucas takes up space in a way that seems effortless, almost thoughtless. He walks into rooms as though he's already been invited, disagrees with senior colleagues without visible anxiety, mentions his own successes in that offhand way that is somehow the most grating way of all. The confidence reads as entitlement. The ease reads as obliviousness. At least this is how Daniel reads it. Daniel has told his wife and 2 close friends and himself that Lucas is simply a certain type. The word he uses is entitled. He says it with a precision that sounds like diagnosis. He has accumulated evidence the way a prosecutor accumulates evidence, returning to specific incidents, adding new ones, refining the case. The case is airtight. He has closed it. What Daniel has not told anyone, including himself, is this. He was 12 years old when he learned that taking up space had consequences. His father was the kind of man who required the room, and the unspoken rule in the house was that there wasn't room for 2. Something in Daniel went quiet around that time. He learned to wait, to understate, to hedge his sentences with apologies even when he wasn't sorry. He became very good at being modest and privately furious at everyone who wasn't. He got straight A's in containment. He graduated with honors in making himself smaller. By the time he is sitting in a meeting watching Lucas interrupt the CFO with what turns out, he must admit, to be a genuinely good idea. The idea is good, Daniel knows this, which makes it worse somehow. He feels something that he would call irritation but which is, underneath that word, something far older and far more personal. He is not watching Lucas. He is watching everything he was told at age 12 that he couldn't be. The anger is not about Lucas. The anger is the 12-year-old boy, still waiting at the door for a permission that is never coming. And here is what makes this mechanism so durable, so resistant to simple insight. Daniel's contempt for Lucas keeps Daniel safe. As long as Lucas is the problem, Daniel does not have to grieve what he buried. He does not have to face the cost of his containment. He does not have to ask the harder question, which is whether the permission he's been waiting for is one that only he can give himself. Projection is not stupidity. It is not weakness. It is the psyche's most elegant way of keeping you away from something it decided, long ago, was too dangerous to feel. The contempt is a dam. And behind it is everything that was never allowed to flow. Here is the thing you have been working very hard not to know. The quality you cannot stand in others is the quality you exiled from yourself. and your fury at seeing it walk free is the fury of someone who paid a price that others are not paying. This is not a gentle reframe. This is the mechanism laid bare. And the reason it lands so hard is not because it's unfamiliar. It's because some part of you has been circling this knowledge for a long time without quite letting yourself touch it. There are two kinds of irritation, and it is worth distinguishing them. The first kind is clean. You dislike cruelty, dishonesty, callousness. Qualities you rejected and continue to reject and have no complicated relationship with. Those irritations don't follow you. They don't feel personal. You encounter them, you note them, and you move on. There is no residue. And then there are the other ones. The ones with a charge. The ones you return to without meaning to. The ones where your irritation has a history, where it connects, obscurely but unmistakably, to something you gave up or were forced to give up a long time ago. Those irritations are not clean. They have weight. They arrive with a heat that is out of proportion to the situation, and if you pay attention, if you actually pay attention rather than simply riding the emotion, you can feel the difference. Marie-Louise von Franz, one of Jung's closest collaborators and one of the most rigorous minds in post-Jungian psychology, wrote extensively about what she called the mirror dynamic. In Shadow and Evil and Fairy Tales, she describes how the strongest reactions to other people, the ones that feel most like certainty, most like justified perception, are precisely the ones most worth interrogating. Not because your perception is necessarily wrong, but because the intensity of it is information about you that your perception alone cannot provide. The mechanism has a kind of cruel elegance. You don't just reject a quality in yourself. You outsource the rejection. You appoint other people to carry it so that you can spend the rest of your life persecuting it in them without ever having to encounter it in yourself. Every judgment you deliver with that particular sharpness is also a sentence. The sentence is always the same. And you are always the one serving it. What does your most consistent irritation say about the sentence you've given yourself? Think about it. Not rhetorically. Actually, the quality that makes your jaw tighten. The behavior you find yourself describing with more specificity than is strictly necessary. Whatever word comes to mind when someone asks you what you truly cannot stand in another person. That quality. Follow it back to where you put it down. Follow it back to the room where you first learned it was not allowed. There will be a room. There is always a room. The person in the room wasn't wrong to protect you. The exile was a reasonable response to an unreasonable situation. But you are not in that room anymore. And the exile has been running on its original terms ever since, without ever being renegotiated, without ever being asked whether it still makes sense. You excused yourself from the table before dessert. You turned up the radio. But the question came home with you anyway. Here is what none of this resolves, and what I want you to sit with rather than rush past. Recognizing projection does not immediately dissolve it. You cannot simply decide to stop projecting. The mechanism operates below the threshold of intention. It runs in the dark. You can recognize it intellectually, you can watch this video, feel the recognition hit, follow each step of the logic, and then sit down at dinner tomorrow night and feel the exact same heat about the exact same quality in the exact same person. That is not failure. That is the nature of the mechanism. Recognition is not the same thing as liberation. But it is the precondition for it. What changes slowly is the relationship to the heat. Before this understanding, the heat feels like evidence. It feels like clarity. It arrives and it says, I am right about this person. After this understanding, not immediately, not completely, but gradually, over time, the heat can begin to feel like a signal instead of a verdict. A tap on the shoulder. Something that is asking you to turn around and look at what's behind you rather than what's in front of you. This is the layer that most accounts of projection miss entirely. They stop at the moment of recognition, at the insight that your irritation has something to do with you. But the deeper question is not where the projection came from. It is why you needed it. What function has it been serving? What has it been protecting you from having to feel or claim or admit about yourself? And what would it cost you to let down that protection? Because the exile of a quality is never free. There is always a cost. The person who buried their ambition, because ambition was dangerous in their family, or because they failed at something that mattered deeply and could not survive the grief of wanting again, that person does not simply stop being ambitious. The ambition goes underground. It doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes a radar, exquisitely calibrated, that detects ambition in others with extraordinary precision and responds to it with extraordinary contempt. The exile cost you twice. Once when you give the quality up, when you decide that part of you is unacceptable and seal it off. And again, every time you see it in someone else and feel the fury of having paid a price they haven't paid. You are not losing only the quality you exiled. You are losing the energy you spend guarding the border. The vigilance is enormous. The contempt is exhausting. And it never ends because the world will never run out of people who carry the thing you put down. Every person who irritates you is standing on the other side of a door you closed. And the discomfort you feel in their presence is not a judgment. It is a knock. You are not angry at them. You are angry at the cost. You are angry at the door you closed and cannot find the key to. You are angry most of all at the quiet knowledge that the door was never locked from the outside. What is locked from the outside cannot be opened from the inside. What is locked from the inside can. This is not a comfort. It is something harder than comfort. It is agency. There is a question underneath everything I've said, and it is this: what would you do with the qualities you've exiled if you let them back in? Not become them. That is not what integration means. You don't have to become loud to reclaim the right to take up space. You don't have to become reckless to reclaim the right to want things. You don't have to become the person you've been criticizing in order to recover what you gave up. The integration Jung was pointing toward is subtler than that and far more radical. It is the act of owning a quality without necessarily enacting it in its raw, unprocessed form. Of sitting with the acknowledgement, yes, this is in me. Not as a sentence you must now serve in a different prison. As information. As the beginning of a conversation with yourself that has been waiting, very patiently, for a very long time. When you can do that, when you can look at the person who irritates you and say quietly and honestly, yes, there is something of me in this, something unexpected happens. The heat changes register. Not that it disappears entirely. The feeling doesn't vanish. But it becomes less compulsive. Less automatic. The reaction that once arrived as a verdict starts to arrive as a question. You start to have a relationship with the feeling instead of simply being inside it. And then something stranger still. The people who once irritated you most become, without any effort on your part, some of your most precise teachers. Not teachers you chose. Not teachers you would have chosen. But teachers nonetheless. They keep showing you, with an accuracy that nothing else provides, exactly where your interior has gone unexplored. Exactly what is still waiting, still intact, behind the door you closed so long ago you forgot it was a door. This is not comfortable. It was never going to be comfortable. Jung understood that the path toward wholeness, what he called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming more fully oneself, ran directly through what we most wanted to avoid in ourselves. Not around it. Not over it. Through it. The friction of other people is not an obstacle to that process. It is the process. Which means the irritation you've been trying to reduce, to manage, to explain away, it was never the problem. It was the instruction. The world has been reflecting you back to yourself all along. Every person who made you clench your teeth, every person you dismissed with a single word, every interaction you walked away from feeling certain you were right, each one was a piece of the same map. A map of something interior, unfinished, still alive. You can, if you choose, keep reading the map as evidence against other people. There is no shortage of evidence. The world will cooperate indefinitely. But you will keep arriving at the same conclusions in different rooms with different names on the door, and the territory inside you will stay exactly as it is, waiting and ungoverned and yours. Or you can do the other thing. The harder thing. The thing that begins not with a resolution but with a reversal. The moment you stop moving toward your irritation and start moving toward its origin. Toward the room. Toward the exile. Toward the part of yourself that was told it had no place and believed it. The question was never what is wrong with them. The question was always, what is this showing me about myself that I have not yet had the courage to look at directly? Whether you follow that question into the interior is still a choice. It will always be a choice. But you can no longer make it in ignorance. The irritation was never about them. It was always a letter. It had your name on it. And it has been in your pocket this whole time. If this reached something real in you, the next video goes deeper. Into why the relationships that hurt you most were also the ones trying to complete you. Jung's concept of the anima and animus, and what we are actually looking for when we fall in love. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The path continues.